Now I want to show you how to use this foot, because before you get started on any of your projects, remember this foot is going to be used for a bunch of other things. If you're only using it for bindings, then you're really not taking advantage of what the foot can do. So let's talk about how we learn to use this foot so you'll have perfect results. I've got the foot open. You can open it up all the way open. I've got it a little bit less than 3/4 of an inch. The idea is I want you to practice with this foot. We're going to practice with something that's lofty. It's got a little bit of a loft to it. I've taken just a cheap placemat that I got that I was never going to use. It's really stiff, it's thick, it's what we call a low loft batting, and I'm just going to stitch along the edge. What we're focusing on right now is this part right here. Oh, by the way, do you notice that the foot's wiggly? That's okay. As it sits up, it's really wiggly. When I bring the fabric down, line that up to the edge, I'm looking right here, and now this is going to hold that in place for me. Now I want to focus right in here. My needle is here. I've got my seam allowance set, so my eyes are here. As I go to stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to stitch, lifting the fabric up. If I put the fabric down, I want you to notice it's harder for me to manage, but if I lift this up, that fabric goes right along the edge. We're going to stitch down one side, tighten this up a little bit, and we're going to stitch again. What I want you to do is just get comfortable with this foot as a seam guide. Again, I'm focusing right here. I don't care what the seam allowance is set at. We're learning how this foot works. When I get to the edge, because I've got some stiffness to the fabric, all I have to do is hold it close. I'm making it a little bit narrower. We're going to continue on. We're just going to go back through this piece, going wider to narrower as I go. Focusing again on that foot. And you can see I'm holding that fabric in right along that edge. Just getting comfortable with the foot. You continue on going narrower, narrower, narrower. When you get to 1/4 of an inch, instead of using cotton, we're going to use our fabric. I'm going to start on this side because I don't have all those threads. When I get to 1/4 of an inch, again, my fabric lifted up really does help. And I've got a perfect 1/4 inch piece that I'm doing here. I've got a low loft piece of batting. Before you move to cotton and cotton, what I'd love you to do is work on your 2 pieces of fabric. We're going to start wider. Get 2 pieces of fabric. We're going to double this up, and I'm going to sew those together. Now, if this was a real project, I'd really put on fence number 3. But for my practice piece, this works fine. What I want to do is get comfortable focusing on those 2 edges together. We're going to do those 2 edges. This piece here, I'd move over here because these edges are sewn, or even rip that out and bring those 2 edges. What we want to focus on is keeping the 2 edges of fabric. I have to keep the edges of my fabric together next to the foot rather than just one piece. So we'll continue to practice with this foot. When you're comfortable there, we're going to move on to a piece of cotton. You take out the number 2, put on the number 1. We'll do that and we'll pick up the video. Now at this point I've swapped out the number 2 and put a number 1 on because I have a piece of cotton. And actually it's like a batik. When I go to sew here, I want to learn with the foot with just 1 piece, because right now all I want to do is focus right here. If I have 2 pieces, which we'll do in a minute, then I've got extra that I want to work on. Our job is again to just focus here. I do like to have my hand up here, so when I get fabric you'll see that my left hand, I just kind of keep a little bit of tension. Alright, at this point I've narrowed my stitch in the ditch foot a little bit less than 1/2 of an inch. And again, I'm focused right on here. We'd keep going till it was narrower, narrower, narrower. And as I continue on, when we get down to 1/4 of an inch, I want you to really take your time and do this, maybe 5 or 6 times as you then work your way towards 1/4 of an inch. When we get to the 1/4 of an inch, you should feel pretty comfortable focusing right here, keeping that fabric right along the edge. When you get to that point, then go ahead and take your 2 pieces of fabric. And I'm just going to cut off a piece here. I've got 2 pieces of fabric here. And what we want to do is just focus in on, again, a wider seam allowance first. Wider because now I'm focused on those 2 pieces of fabric. We're just saying, okay, this is overkill, but the idea is I want you to get comfortable with this foot. As I stitch, we're going to go right to that edge. Again, work your way towards where you're down to 1/4 of an inch. When you get to the 1/4 of an inch, then you can do your jelly rolls, your log cabins, your strips, so that you've got a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance, keeping that nice and consistent. Let's go ahead and bring that all the way down, even though I have right sides together and I've got a long piece here. Doesn't matter, we're just learning to use this foot. Every now and then, if I don't have my fabric lined up, you can see here they're perfect. It almost looks like one piece. If I have to stop just to make sure my fabric's lined up here, My left hand has a little bit of tension. My right hand comes back here just to make sure those are lined up. And as I stitch, my eyes are always focused right here. Use this foot as a 1/4 inch piecing foot, double needle top stitching, 5/8, 3/8, whatever it is. We're going to now show you double needle top stitching.